The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Medical Center buzzed overhead as Rebecca walked down the sterile white corridor toward the head nurse's office. She'd been working in the intensive care unit for almost 8 years now, and she thought she'd seen everything: car accident victims, stroke patients, people who'd collapsed without warning. But what awaited her that Tuesday morning was something entirely different. "Rebecca, come in and close the door," Linda said, gesturing to the chair across from her cluttered desk. Linda had been the head nurse for 15 years, and she rarely called anyone into her office unless it was serious. Rebecca sat down, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she made a mistake? Was someone complaining about her care? She smoothed her scrubs nervously and waited. "I have a special assignment for you," Linda began, pulling out a thick medical file. "We have a patient in room 412. He's been with us for 3 months now. Coma patient. The family requested round-the-clock specialized care, and I think you're the right person for this." Rebecca took the file and opened it. The patient was a 45-year-old man named Victor Ashford. Real estate developer. Wealthy beyond what most people could imagine. He'd been in a severe car accident on a rainy night in March, and the impact had left him in a deep coma. The medical notes were extensive, but the prognosis remained uncertain. "Why me?" Rebecca asked, looking up from the file. Linda leaned back in her chair. "Because you care, Rebecca. I've watched you with coma patients. You talk to them. You treat them like people, not just bodies and beds. This man's family is difficult. His brother visits maybe once a week, always in a hurry, always asking about the will and the business. The daughter hasn't been here in a month. They need someone who'll see Victor as a human being." Rebecca felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She'd always believed that coma patients could hear, could sense the world around them even if they couldn't respond. It's why she read to them, why she explained every procedure, why she held their hands and told them they weren't alone. Most of her colleagues thought she was wasting her time, but she couldn't bring herself to treat an unconscious person like furniture. "When do I start?" she asked. "Today. He's all yours." Room 412 was at the end of the hall, away from the busier sections of the ICU. Rebecca pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was large and private, clearly upgraded for someone with money. Expensive flowers sat wilting in a vase by the window, probably sent by business associates who'd already forgotten about the man lying motionless in the bed. Victor Ashford looked smaller than she expected. In her mind, millionaires were always imposing figures, but here he was, just another person fighting to survive. His face was peaceful, almost serene, with dark hair graying at the temples. Various tubes and monitors connected him to machines that beeped softly, tracking every breath and heartbeat. Rebecca approached the bed slowly, as she always did with new patients. "Hello, Victor," she said softly. "My name is Rebecca, and I'm going to be taking care of you. I know you probably can't respond, but I believe you can hear me, so I'm going to talk to you, explain everything I'm doing, and treat you the way I'd want to be treated if I were in your place." She began her assessment, checking his vitals, examining the IV lines, adjusting the ventilator settings. All the while she narrated her actions. "I'm just checking your blood pressure now. It looks good, steady. That's what we want to see." Over the following days, Rebecca settled into a routine with Victor. She arrived each morning at 7, greeting him cheerfully as if he were awake. She'd tell him about the weather, about the sunrise she'd seen on her drive to the hospital, about the coffee she'd grabbed from the cafeteria that somehow always tasted like cardboard. During the quiet afternoon hours, when the ICU was less chaotic, Rebecca would pull up a chair beside his bed and talk. Really talk. She told him about her life, about her younger sister who was struggling through community college, working 2 jobs to afford tuition because their parents couldn't help. She told him about her dream of opening a free clinic someday in the neighborhood where she grew up, where people couldn't afford regular medical care and often waited until emergencies to seek help. "I see these kids come into the ER with infections that could have been treated with simple antibiotics if they'd just had access to a doctor," she said one afternoon, adjusting Victor's pillow. "Parents working 3 jobs, no insurance, afraid of the bills. By the time they come in, everything's worse. More expensive. More dangerous. It doesn't have to be that way." She wasn't sure why she was telling all this to an unconscious man, but somehow it felt natural. Maybe it was because he couldn't judge her, couldn't tell her the dream was unrealistic or naive. Or maybe it was because she sensed deep down that he was listening. Victor's brother came by on Thursday evening. Rebecca was in the middle of giving Victor a sponge bath, maintaining his dignity with careful draping, when a tall man in an expensive suit walked in without knocking. "I'm David Ashford," he announced, barely glancing at his brother. "Victor's brother. How's he doing?" Rebecca dried her hands and faced him. "Stable. No changes this week." "Right." David pulled out his phone, already distracted. "The doctors keep saying stable, stable, stable. What does that even mean? Is he going to wake up or not?" "It's hard to say with coma patients," Rebecca explained gently. "Every case is different." "This is costing the company a fortune in medical bills," David muttered, scrolling through his emails. 3 months now. The board is getting restless. They need leadership, and Victor's just lying here. Rebecca felt anger flash through her, but she kept her voice professional. "Your brother is fighting for his life." David looked up, seeming to notice her disapproval. Of course. I didn't mean it like that. It's just complicated, the business, the assets, everything's in limbo. Our father built this company from nothing, and now it's just waiting." He stayed for exactly 10 minutes, made a phone call from the hallway that Rebecca could hear through the door, something about quarterly reports and shareholder meetings, and then left without saying goodbye to Victor. After he was gone, Rebecca sat back down beside the bed. "I'm sorry about that," she whispered. "Family can be complicated, can't they?" She noticed something odd. Victor's heart rate had elevated during David's visit. She'd seen it on the monitor, the numbers climbing from his usual steady rhythm to something faster, more agitated. When David left, it had slowly returned to normal. Coincidence? Maybe. But Rebecca had learned to trust her instincts. That weekend, while organizing Victor's belongings in the room, Rebecca found a leather journal tucked in the drawer of his bedside table. She hesitated, knowing she shouldn't invade a patient's privacy, but something made her open it. The entries were dated from the months before the accident. Victor's handwriting was neat, precise, the words of someone who thought carefully before writing. As Rebecca read, a picture emerged of a man very different from the millionaire businessman his brother described. "Made another million today," one entry read. "Should feel good. Doesn't. Closed a deal that'll displace 50 families from affordable housing. They'll build luxury condos. Progress, they call it. Profit, I call it. When did I become this person?" Another entry, dated 2 months before the accident. "Saw a kid today, maybe 8 years old, selling flowers at a stoplight. Middle of winter. Should have been in school. Gave him $100. He looked at me like I'd given him the world. That look meant more than any business deal I've ever made. Why can't I figure out how to make that feeling last?" Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. She kept reading, discovering entries about charity ideas Victor had never acted on, businesses he wanted to reform, changes he wanted to make. Here was a man trapped between the life he'd built and the person he wanted to become. She closed the journal carefully and looked at Victor's peaceful face. "I found your journal," she said softly. "I hope you don't mind. It tells me a lot about who you really are. Not the businessman everyone sees, but the person underneath, the one who wants to make things better." As the weeks passed, Rebecca developed a habit of reading Victor's own words back to him. She'd open the journal and share his thoughts, adding her own commentary, telling him about the parallels she saw between his dreams and hers. "You wrote about wanting to fund scholarships," she said one evening. "My sister, the one I told you about, she's exactly the kind of student who needs that. Smart, driven, working herself to exhaustion just to afford books. There are thousands like her. You could change that, Victor. If you wake up, you could actually do all these things you wrote about." She held his hand as she spoke, a gesture that had become natural over the weeks. His hand was warm, the fingers long and elegant. She wondered what it would be like if those fingers could squeeze back, if those closed eyes could open and see her. The other nurses thought she was crazy, spending so much time talking to an unconscious patient, but Rebecca didn't care. Somewhere in that unresponsive body was a person who'd been trying to change, trying to be better, and if her voice, her presence, her belief could reach him wherever he was, then every word was worth it. She just had to keep trying. Keep talking, keep hoping that somewhere in the darkness, Victor Ashford was listening. 2 months had passed since Rebecca started caring for Victor, and the routine had become as familiar as breathing. She arrived each morning with coffee and hope, spent her shifts monitoring his vitals and talking to him about everything and nothing, and left each evening wondering if tomorrow would be different. But something was changing. Small things at first, easy to dismiss as coincidence or wishful thinking. It started on a Monday morning in late September. Rebecca was adjusting the blinds to let in the autumn sunlight, telling Victor about the changing leaves she'd seen on her drive to work, when she noticed his heart rate tick up on the monitor. Just a few beats per minute, nothing dramatic but enough to catch her attention. "You like the sunshine, don't you?" she said, watching the numbers. "I think you can feel it even with your eyes closed. The warmth on your skin." The heart rate stayed elevated, steady but higher than his baseline. When she closed the blinds to check a theory, it gradually lowered again. When she opened them, it rose. Rebecca stood there, her own heart pounding. She wanted to call the doctors to show them what she was seeing, but she knew what they'd say: random fluctuations, meaningless variations. The body did strange things in a coma, but Rebecca didn't believe in coincidences anymore. She started testing her theory carefully, quietly, not telling anyone what she was doing. When she held Victor's hand while talking about her sister's struggles, his fingers would twitch. Not every time, but often enough that she couldn't ignore it. When she read from his journal, particularly the passages about his regrets and hopes, his breathing would change patterns slightly. "You're in there, aren't you?" she whispered one afternoon, holding his hand against her cheek. "You're hearing all of this. I don't know how or why, but you're present somehow. You're fighting to come back." The doctors made their rounds and saw nothing unusual. Stable coma patient, unchanged prognosis, continue current care. But Rebecca saw the truth in the small moments, in the subtle responses that happened only when she was there, only when she was talking to him about things that mattered. She intensified her efforts. During her lunch breaks, instead of eating in the cafeteria with the other nurses, she'd stay in room 412. She brought her phone and showed Victor pictures of her neighborhood, the crumbling clinic building she hoped to renovate someday, the faces of kids who needed help. "This is Danny," she said, holding up a photo of a 7-year-old boy she'd treated in the ER the week before. Came in with pneumonia because his mom couldn't afford to take him to a regular doctor for what started as a simple cold. 3 days in the hospital when it could have been prevented with a $20 visit to a clinic. "That's what I want to change, Victor. That's what you wrote about wanting to change, too." Victor's eyelids fluttered. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. She leaned closer, watching intently, but the movement didn't repeat. Still, she'd seen it. She was certain. That evening, David came by again. He'd been visiting more frequently lately, always looking tense, always on his phone. Rebecca had learned to time her breaks around his visits because she couldn't stand listening to him discuss business matters as if his brother weren't lying right there. But this time was different. This time David brought someone with him, a lawyer in a gray suit carrying a briefcase full of documents. "We need the room," David said curtly when he walked in. "Family business." Rebecca wanted to argue, to say that Victor needed consistent care, but hospital policy was clear about family rights. She nodded and stepped out, leaving the door slightly ajar as she walked to the nurse's station nearby. She couldn't hear everything, but she caught fragments. The lawyer's voice talking about power of attorney and competency declarations. David responding with words like assets and restructuring and timeline. Rebecca felt sick. She'd seen this before with other coma patients, families getting impatient, making decisions about pulling plugs or transferring to long-term care facilities. But something about this felt different. More calculated, more cold. When they finally left 20 minutes later, Rebecca returned to the room. Victor's heart rate was elevated again, his breathing slightly faster than normal. She checked all the medical reasons it could be: pain, discomfort, medication issues, but found nothing. "What did they talk about?" she asked softly, taking his hand. "What scared you?" That's when she noticed the sweat on his forehead. She wiped it gently with a cool cloth, her mind racing. Coma patients didn't sweat from stress. They didn't respond emotionally to conversations. Unless they were more aware than anyone realized. Rebecca made a decision then. She pulled out her phone and took photos of all Victor's medical charts, his vital signs from the past week, everything that showed the subtle changes she'd been documenting. She didn't know what she was going to do with them, but instinct told her she might need evidence of something later. The next day, She brought Victor's journal to work and read it to him more extensively than before. Not just passages, but whole entries, her voice soft and steady. September 10th, 2 months before the accident, she read. Had it out with David today. He's been cooking the books, skimming money from the charitable foundation Dad set up. Confronted him. He denied everything, got angry. Said I'm becoming soft, that business isn't about feelings. Told him I'm restructuring the company, making changes, giving employees ownership stakes, increasing charitable giving. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I have, or maybe I've finally found it. Rebecca paused, her hand trembling slightly. Victor, did something happen between you and your brother? Something more than just business disagreements? Victor's fingers twitched in her hand. Not much, barely perceptible, but she felt it. She kept reading, finding more entries about David. About discovering financial irregularities. About planning to meet with lawyers and accountants. About wanting to do the right thing even if it meant going against family. The last entry was dated 2 days before the accident. Meeting with the investigators tomorrow. Have all the evidence I need. David's been embezzling for years, hiding it through shell companies. I don't want to destroy him, but I can't let this continue. Dad built this company on integrity. I have to protect that legacy, even if it means exposing my own brother. God help me, I hope I'm making the right choice. Rebecca closed the journal, her heart pounding. The accident had happened the day after that meeting. Victor had been driving home late at night alone on a road he knew well. His car had gone off a cliff, the police report calling it a tragic accident, possibly due to rain and poor visibility. But what if it wasn't an accident? She looked at Victor's peaceful face, at the machines keeping him alive, and felt a chill run down her spine. If David had been stealing money, if Victor had been about to expose him, if the accident happened right after Victor met with investigators, I'm probably being paranoid, she whispered to Victor, seeing conspiracy theories where there's just bad luck. But something doesn't feel right. Your brother, the way he acts, the lawyer he brought in. Victor, if you can hear me, if you know something, you have to come back. You have to wake up and tell the truth. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca became increasingly vigilant. She documented everything. Every time David visited, every conversation she overheard, every change in Victor's responses. She started arriving early and staying late, afraid to leave him alone for too long. The other nurses noticed her obsession. You're getting too attached, her friend Angela warned her one day in the break room. It's not healthy, Rebecca. He's a coma patient. He's probably not even aware you exist. He is aware, Rebecca insisted. I know it sounds crazy, but I can see it. He responds to my voice, to touch, to emotional conversations. Angela looked at her with concern. Even if that's true, what are you hoping for? That he'll just wake up one day like a fairy tale? Rebecca, he's been under for 5 months. The longer it goes, the less likely recovery becomes. I know the statistics, Rebecca said quietly, but I also know what I see. And I know that something isn't right with his brother. I think Victor needs protection, not just medical care. Protection from what? His own family? Rebecca didn't answer because she wasn't sure herself. It sounded paranoid even in her own head. But the feeling wouldn't go away. One evening, she decided to do something risky. After her shift ended, instead of going home, she went to the hospital's records department. She knew one of the clerks, an older woman named Patricia who owed her a favor after Rebecca had helped care for her husband the previous year. I need to see something, Rebecca said. The police report from Victor Ashford's accident. I know the hospital got a copy for the insurance paperwork. Patricia hesitated. That's not exactly protocol, honey. Please. It's important. Something in Rebecca's voice must have convinced her because Patricia sighed and pulled up the file on her computer. 5 minutes. That's all you get. Rebecca read quickly, her eyes scanning the details. Single vehicle accident. Car went through a guardrail on Mountain Ridge Road. Rainy conditions. No other vehicles involved. Brake failure suspected but not confirmed. Car 2 damaged for conclusive analysis. No signs of foul play. But there, buried in the investigator's notes, was something interesting. Witness reported seeing another car following Victor's vehicle earlier that evening. Dark sedan, no license plate identified. Witness couldn't be certain it was related. Lead not pursued. Rebecca's hands shook as she read. It might mean nothing. Probably meant nothing. Mountain Ridge Road was a public highway. Lots of cars traveled it, but combined with everything else, David's behavior, the embezzlement mentioned in Victor's journal, the timing of the accident, It painted a picture that made Rebecca's blood run cold. She thanked Patricia and left, her mind spinning. She couldn't go to the police with suspicions based on a coma patient's journal and her own gut feelings. She'd sound insane, but she also couldn't ignore what she knew. That night, lying in bed unable to sleep, Rebecca made a decision. She would protect Victor however she could. She'd stay close, document everything, and wait. Wait for him to wake up, because she was becoming more convinced every day that he would. That he was fighting his way back to consciousness for a reason. The next morning, she arrived at the hospital to find David in Victor's room again, this time with two men in suits she didn't recognize. Hospital administration had given him access despite the early hour. "What's going on?" Rebecca asked, walking in. David turned, his expression cold. "This doesn't concern you. We're discussing my brother's long-term care options. I'm his nurse. Everything about his care concerns me." One of the men stepped forward. "We're from Ashford Properties, ma'am. The company Mr. Ashford owns. We're simply evaluating the situation and discussing contingencies." "Contingencies for what?" "For the possibility that Mr. Ashford may not recover," David said bluntly. "It's been 5 months. The doctors say the chances decrease significantly after 6 months. We need to be realistic." Rebecca felt anger surge through her. "He's still alive. He's still fighting." "He's a vegetable," David snapped, then seemed to catch himself, softening his tone. "Look, I know you care. That's admirable. But you're not family. You don't understand the complexities of the situation. The business, the assets, the employees depending on the company for their livelihoods. Decisions have to be made. Not yet, they don't. Not while there's still hope." After they left, Rebecca sat beside Victor's bed, holding his hand tightly. "I don't know if you can hear me," she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "But if you can, you need to fight harder. Your brother is planning something, and I think you're running out of time. Please, Victor, please wake up. The world needs you. I need you to wake up and tell the truth about what happened." And then she felt it. Unmistakable this time. Victor's fingers squeezed her hand. Weak, barely there, but deliberate. A response. Rebecca's breath caught. She looked at his face, at his closed eyes, and saw something she'd never seen before. A single tear sliding down from the corner of his eye. He was crying. He was in there, aware, listening to everything. And he was trying desperately to come back. The night shift was always quieter in the ICU. The overhead lights dimmed, the constant bustle of daytime reduced to occasional footsteps, and the steady beep of monitors. Rebecca had volunteered to take extra night shifts with Victor, telling her supervisor she wanted to ensure continuity of care. The truth was, she was afraid to leave him alone. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, nearly 6 months since Victor's accident, when everything changed. Rebecca sat in her usual chair beside his bed, exhausted but unable to sleep despite the late hour. She'd been telling him about a little girl who'd come into the emergency room earlier that evening. 5 years old, suffering from an asthma attack because her family couldn't afford the preventive medication. "She's okay now," Rebecca said softly, holding Victor's hand. "We got her stabilized." But her mother was crying, saying she felt like she'd failed her daughter. I wanted to tell her it's not her fault. It's the system that's broken. It's the fact that a single mother working 2 jobs still can't afford $100 a month for medicine that would keep her child healthy. That's what needs to change. She paused, wiping her tired eyes. "You know what the worst part is? That little girl reminded me of why I became a nurse in the first place. My sister, she had asthma as a kid. My parents couldn't always afford her medication either. I remember nights when she couldn't breathe, when we'd sit in the bathroom with steam running, trying anything to help her because we couldn't afford another ER visit. I was only 12, but I swore then that I'd become a nurse, that I'd help people who couldn't help themselves." Rebecca looked at Victor's still face, at the peaceful expression that hadn't changed in half a year. "I thought that would be enough, you know, being a nurse helping one person at a time, but it's not enough. There are too many people, too many kids like that little girl. I need resources I don't have. I need the free clinic I dream about. She stopped, her voice breaking. "I need you to wake up, Victor. I know that's selfish. I know I'm just a nurse you never knew existed before this accident. But I've read your journal. I know who you really are inside. I know you want to make a difference too. And I think together, we could actually do something meaningful. So please, please come back." She squeezed his hand, expecting nothing. The same unresponsive warmth she'd felt every day for months. But this time, something was different. Victor's fingers moved. Not a twitch, not an involuntary reflex, but a deliberate squeeze. Weak, barely there, but unmistakable. Rebecca's eyes flew to his face. "Victor?" His eyelids fluttered. Just slightly, the tiniest movement, but after 6 months of perfect stillness, it was everything. "Victor, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." Another squeeze, stronger this time. Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest. She reached for the call button, but before she could press it, Victor's eyes opened. Slowly, like someone emerging from a deep sleep, unfocused and confused, but open. "Oh my God," Rebecca breathed. "Victor, you're awake. You're actually awake." His eyes moved toward her, voice struggling to focus. His lips parted, but only a dry rasp came out. "Don't try to talk yet," Rebecca said, her hand shaking as she pressed the call button repeatedly. "You have a breathing tube. Just stay calm. You're in the hospital. You've been in a coma, but you're waking up now. You're going to be okay." The response was immediate. Nurses rushed in, followed quickly by the on-call doctor. The room filled with controlled chaos as they assessed Victor. Removed the breathing tube with careful precision. Asked him questions he couldn't yet answer. Rebecca stepped back, giving them space to work. Her hand pressed over her mouth as tears streamed down her face. 6 months. 6 months of hoping, of talking, of believing when everyone else said there was no point. And he'd come back. Over the next few hours, as dawn broke outside the window, Victor slowly regained more awareness. He was weak, his muscles atrophied from months of immobility. His voice was rough and barely audible. But his mind was intact, his eyes alert and searching. "Rebecca," he croaked when the doctors finally left them alone for a moment. His first clear word. She moved back to his bedside immediately. "I'm here." "How do you know my name?" "Heard everything," he whispered. "Every word." "You said," Rebecca felt her breath catch. "You heard me?" "All this time?" He managed a tiny nod. Couldn't respond, trapped. "But I heard." The doctors said that was impossible. "Was there?" he insisted, his eyes intense despite his weakness. "Every story. Your sister. The clinic. The journal. All of it." Rebecca sat down hard, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. How is that possible?" "Don't know," Victor said. "Like watching through a window. Locked in, your voice. Only thing keeping me sane." Over the next few days, as Victor grew stronger through intensive rehabilitation, the medical team marveled at his recovery. It was unprecedented for someone in his condition to emerge from a coma with such cognitive clarity. The attending physician called it a miracle, but Victor knew better. He told Rebecca during the quiet moments when they were alone what it had been like. How he'd been aware of everything but unable to move, unable to respond, trapped in his own body like a prisoner. How her voice had been his lifeline, the only thing that kept him from giving up and slipping away completely. "You talked about your dreams," he said one afternoon as Rebecca helped him with his physical therapy exercises. "The clinic, the kids you want to help. It gave me something to focus on, something beyond the darkness." "I can't imagine how terrifying that must have been," Rebecca said softly. "It was, but it also gave me clarity." He paused to catch his breath, still weak from months of immobility. "I spent years building an empire I didn't believe in, making money I didn't need. Your stories reminded me what matters." Rebecca helped him back into bed, adjusting his pillows. "Your journal said you wanted to change things. Before the accident," Victor's expression darkened. "The accident, what do you remember?" "Enough." His jaw tightened. "David, your brother?" "Not an accident," Victor said carefully, his voice still weak but his eyes sharp.
"He tampered."
"With my car? The brakes?" Rebecca felt her suspicions confirmed, but hearing him say it out loud still shocked her. "You remember that?" "Some of it. Pieces." He closed his eyes, concentrating. "I'd discovered the embezzlement. Years of it, millions, was going to expose him. Met with investigators that afternoon. Drove home. Brakes failed. Knew immediately. Too coincidental. Victor, we need to tell someone. The police." "No proof," he interrupted. "Car destroyed. My word. Against his. Plus," he looked at her seriously. "He's been here. I heard him. Planning to have me," declared incompetent. "Brain damage from the coma." Rebecca remembered the lawyer, the men in suits, David's increasing visits. He's been positioning himself to take over your company. The visits have been increasing lately. How long has it been?
6 months.
Almost exactly. Victor's expression grew grim.
6 months.
Long enough for him to consolidate power. Tell everyone I'm not coming back, but you are back. That changes everything, does it? Victor asked. I've been in a coma. I have no physical proof. Who's going to believe me? Rebecca understood his fear, but she refused to let him give up. I believe you. And I've been documenting everything. David's visits, the things he said, the timeline. It's not much, but it's something. Victor looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Why? Why would you do that for a stranger? You're not a stranger. Not after 6 months of conversation, even if it was one-sided. She smiled slightly. Besides, I read your journal. I know who you are, Victor. You're someone who wants to do good but got lost along the way. You deserve the chance to find your way back. Before Victor could respond, the door opened. Rebecca's heart sank as David walked in, his expression shifting from boredom to shock when he saw Victor awake and alert. Victor, David said, his voice carefully controlled. You're awake. This is incredible. When did this happen? Few days ago, Victor said, his voice stronger than it had been moments before. Interesting how he could suddenly project strength, Rebecca thought. David moved closer, his eyes scanning his brother assessingly. This is a miracle. The doctor said the chances were so slim. We'd almost given up hope, had you? Victor asked, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. Of course not completely, David said smoothly, but you understand the business needed leadership. I've been managing things in your absence, trying to keep Dad's legacy alive. I'm sure you have. Rebecca could feel the tension in the room, thick and uncomfortable. David's eyes kept flicking to her, suspicious and calculating. Could we have a moment alone? David asked. Family business to discuss? Rebecca stays, Victor said firmly. She's been taking care of me. She should hear. Anything related to my care. David's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine, Victor, I need to be honest with you. The doctors have concerns about your recovery. 6 months in a coma, that's a long time. There could be cognitive issues, memory problems. We need to have you properly evaluated. My mind is fine. With all due respect, you might not be the best judge of that right now. Brain trauma can affect judgment, perception. I've already spoken with specialists who can assess your competency. Competency? Victor interrupted. That's what this is about? Declaring me incompetent? It's about making sure you're capable of making sound decisions, especially regarding the business. There are millions at stake, hundreds of employees depending on... Get out, Victor said quietly. David blinked. What? Get out. Victor's voice was stronger now, carrying authority despite his physical weakness. I know what you did, David. I know about the embezzlement. The accident. All of it. David's expression went very still. The coma has clearly affected your memory. You're confused, probably experiencing delusions. I said get out. Rebecca moved closer to Victor's bed, her presence supportive. David looked between them, his expression hardening. You've been poisoning him against me, David said to Rebecca. Whatever you think you'll get out of this, whatever money you're hoping for. Leave, Rebecca said firmly. Your brother asked you to go. If you don't, I'll call security. David stared at them both for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word. But the look he gave them was chilling. This wasn't over. After he left, Victor slumped back against his pillows, exhausted. That was stupid. I shouldn't have confronted him yet. You were amazing, Rebecca said. I have no proof. He'll move faster now. Get his lawyers, his doctors. Paint me as delusional from brain damage. Then we need to find proof before he does. Victor looked at her. We? You didn't think I'd abandon you now, did you? Rebecca smiled. I've invested 6 months in keeping you alive. I'm not going to let your brother destroy you now that you're finally awake. For the first time since waking, Victor smiled back. It was weak, tired, but genuine. Thank you. For everything. For believing? When no one else did. That's what I do, Rebecca said. I believe in second chances. In miracles. In people who deserve another shot at doing the right thing. Then let's make sure. I get that shot, Victor said. Whatever it takes. Rebecca nodded, knowing that the real battle was just beginning. Victor had survived 6 months in a coma. Had clawed his way back to consciousness against impossible odds. Now they had to prove what really happened, expose David's crimes, and give Victor the chance to become the person he'd always wanted to be. The awakening was just the beginning. The real miracle would be what came next. Victor's recovery progressed faster than anyone expected. Within a week of waking, he'd regained enough strength to sit up in bed for extended periods. Within 2 weeks, he was taking his first shaky steps with the help of physical therapists. His mind remained sharp, his memories returning in fragments that he shared only with Rebecca during their private moments. But while Victor grew stronger, so did David's efforts to undermine him. It started subtly. Hospital staff began treating Victor differently, asking him questions designed to test his mental acuity. Noting his responses in charts Rebecca wasn't supposed to see, but managed to glimpse anyway. A neurologist she'd never met appeared to conduct cognitive tests. A psychiatrist came by to assess his emotional state and judgment capacity. "They're building a case," Rebecca told Victor one evening after his physical therapy session. "Your brother's setting the stage to declare you incompetent." "I know," Victor said, exhausted from the day's exertion. "But what can we do? We need proof of what he did, and I don't know where to start looking." Rebecca had been thinking about this for days. "Your accident. You said you met with investigators the day it happened. Who were they? What did you tell them?" Victor closed his eyes, concentrating. "Federal investigators. Financial Crimes Division. I'd contacted them weeks before, told them about irregularities in the company books. They came to my office with an agent from the SEC. I gave them copies of everything I'd found, falsified reports, hidden accounts, forged signatures. Do you remember their names?" "The lead investigator was Patterson, Michael Patterson, FBI." Victor's eyes opened. "If he still has my files, that's our proof." "But it's been 6 months. The case might be closed. I was their main witness, and then I disappeared into a coma." "We need to find him," Rebecca said. "We need to know if the investigation continued." "How?" "I can barely walk. I'm trapped in this hospital with David watching every move." Rebecca stood up, her mind made up. "Then I'll find him. I'll go to the FBI office, track down this Patterson, and find out what happened to the investigation." "Rebecca, that's dangerous. If David finds out, he won't. I'm just a nurse. Nobody's watching me." She took Victor's hand. "You've been fighting for 6 months to come back. Let me fight for you now." The next day was Rebecca's scheduled day off. Instead of resting, she drove downtown to the federal building, her heart pounding as she passed through security. She'd never been in an FBI office before, and everything about it felt intimidating. The serious-faced agents, the security cameras, the sense that everyone could see right through her. At the reception desk, she asked for Agent Michael Patterson. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, asked for her name and the nature of her business. "I'm here about Victor Ashford," Rebecca said. "I'm his nurse. He recently woke from a coma and asked me to contact Agent Patterson about an investigation." The receptionist's expression shifted slightly. "One moment." 20 minutes later, Rebecca sat in a small conference room across from a man in his 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. Michael Patterson looked like someone who'd seen too much and slept too little. "Victor Ashford," Patterson said, his voice neutral. "We were told he'd died." Rebecca's blood ran cold. "What? Who told you that?" "His brother came here about 3 months ago. Said Victor had passed away from complications related to his accident. Offered to continue cooperating with our investigation, but claimed most of Victor's evidence had been lost in the crash." "That's a lie," Rebecca said firmly. "Victor didn't die. He was in a coma, but he woke up 2 weeks ago, and he remembers everything about the embezzlement, about the files he gave you." Patterson leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You understand this is a serious accusation. David Ashford presented us with a death certificate, medical records, everything. Fake, it has to be. I'm Victor's nurse. I've been caring for him for 6 months. He's alive and he wants to continue helping your investigation." Patterson was quiet for a long moment. "If what you're saying is true, this changes everything. David Ashford's cooperation was suspicious from the start. Too eager, too convenient. We suspected he was feeding us selective information, leading us away from his own involvement." "So the investigation is still active?" "Stalled but active. Without Victor's testimony and the evidence he promised us, we couldn't move forward. But if he's alive and willing to testify..." Patterson pulled out a card and handed it to Rebecca. "Have Victor call me directly. We'll need to verify his identity, take his statement, and most importantly, get him somewhere safe. Safe? You think David would? Ms. Clark, if David Ashford tried to kill his brother once and then lied to federal investigators about his death, he's already committed multiple felonies. He's not going to just let Victor testify against him. Your patient is in danger. Rebecca felt her stomach drop. She'd known David was dangerous, but hearing a federal agent confirm it made it terrifyingly real. What should we do? Keep Victor in the hospital for now. It's a public place with security. Don't let him be alone with his brother under any circumstances. I'll start the process of reopening the case officially, but I need to talk to Victor first. Can you arrange a secure call? Rebecca nodded, taking the card. I'll have him call you tonight. When she returned to the hospital that evening, she found Victor's room crowded with people. Her heart sank as she recognized David, along with two men in expensive suits and a woman in a white coat she didn't recognize. What's going on? Rebecca asked, pushing into the room. David turned to her with a cold smile. Rebecca, we're just having Victor sign some papers. Temporary medical power of attorney, giving me the ability to make healthcare decisions on his behalf while he continues his recovery. I'm not signing anything, Victor said from the bed, his voice strained. I've told you that 3 times now. Victor, you're not thinking clearly, the woman in the white coat said gently. I'm Dr. Morrison, a psychiatrist. Your brother is concerned about your judgment following your prolonged coma. These delusions you're experiencing about him trying to harm you, they're not delusions, Victor said. That's exactly what someone experiencing delusions would say, Dr. Morrison continued. The trauma to your brain, the length of time you were unconscious, these factors can create false memories, paranoid thoughts. Your brother only wants what's best for you. Rebecca stepped forward. Victor's mental state is fine. His cognitive tests have all been normal. Are you a psychiatrist, Ms. Clark? One of the suits asked. Because Dr. Morrison is board certified with over 20 years of experience. I think her professional opinion carries more weight than a nurse's observations. This is coercion, Rebecca said, looking at Victor. You don't have to sign anything. David's expression hardened. Actually, if Victor is deemed mentally incompetent to make his own decisions, I can petition the court to have a conservatorship established. This would be much simpler and less embarrassing for everyone involved. You can't, I can and I will, David interrupted. Unless Victor signs these papers willingly, demonstrating he's capable of making rational decisions about his care. It was a trap. Sign the papers and give David control, or refuse and be declared incompetent anyway. Rebecca watched Victor's face, seeing the calculation there, the understanding of the impossible position he was in. Everyone out, Victor said quietly, except Rebecca. I need to think. Victor, David started. Out, now. Or I start screaming until security comes, and we'll see how that looks for your case that I'm mentally stable. After a tense moment, David gestured to the others. They filed out, but the threat hung in the air. They'd be back, and next time they might not ask permission. Once they were alone, Victor slumped back against his pillows. He's going to do it. He's going to have me declared incompetent. Not if we move first. Rebecca pulled out Agent Patterson's card. I found him. The investigator you met with. He's still working the case. He needs to talk to you. Victor took the card, his hand trembling slightly. David told them I was dead. 3 months ago. Patterson said David presented a death certificate and medical records. He's been feeding them false information ever since, derailing the investigation. That's fraud. Federal obstruction of justice. Which is why Patterson wants to reopen the case officially. But he needs your testimony first, and he said you need to be somewhere safe. Victor looked at the door, at the camera in the corner of his room that he'd only recently noticed. I'm not safe here. David has access connections. If he's desperate enough to fabricate my death, then we need to get you out. Rebecca finished. Tonight, I can barely walk. You can walk well enough. Victor, if we wait, David will either get you declared incompetent or... She couldn't finish the sentence, but they both knew what she meant. Victor nodded slowly. Okay, how? Rebecca had been thinking about this since leaving the FBI office. My shift ends at 11. Most of the night staff will be doing rounds at midnight. There's a 15-minute window when your hallway is usually empty. I can get a wheelchair, get you into the service elevator and out through the loading dock. My car's parked nearby. Where would we go? I have a friend, another nurse. She's out of town this week. Said I could use her apartment to get away from my roommate for a few days. It's in Queen's anonymous apartment building. No one would think to look there. Rebecca, if you do this, you could lose your job. Maybe face charges for taking a patient. I know the risks, she interrupted. But I also know that if we don't do this, you might not survive long enough for the investigation to matter. David has too much to lose. Victor studied her for a long moment. Why are you doing this, really? You barely know me. I know you well enough, Rebecca said. I know you spent 6 months listening to me talk about my dreams and hopes. I know you wrote in your journal about wanting to change, wanting to help people, wanting to be better than the life you'd built. I know that you're someone worth saving. That's enough. Victor's eyes glistened. If we do this, there's no going back. David will know you helped me. He'll come after you too. Then we'd better make sure Agent Patterson's case is airtight, Rebecca said. Are you in? Victor took a deep breath, then nodded. I'm in. The next few hours crawled by. Rebecca went through her normal routine, giving no indication that anything was different. She chatted with other nurses, made her rounds, documented vitals. But inside, her heart raced with fear and adrenaline. At 11:30, she casually wheeled a transport chair into the supply room near Victor's hallway. At 11:45, she helped him into his clothes, the ones he'd been wearing the night of the accident, cleaned and stored in his room's closet. At 11:55, she checked the hallway camera feeds at the nurses' station, confirming what she'd learned over months of night shifts. The security guard did his rounds predictably, and right now he was 3 floors away. At midnight exactly, Rebecca pushed open Victor's door. Ready? As I'll ever be. She helped him into the wheelchair, threw a blanket over his lap, and grabbed his medical chart. If anyone stopped them, she'd say she was taking him for emergency imaging. It was thin, but it was all they had. The hallway was empty. The service elevator opened immediately. They descended to the loading dock level without seeing another person. Rebecca's hands shook as she pushed Victor toward the exit, expecting alarms or shouts or security guards at any moment. But they made it outside into the cool night air, and Rebecca's car was exactly where she'd left it. She helped Victor into the passenger seat, collapsed the wheelchair, and drove away from St. Mary's Medical Center with her heart in her throat. Behind them, Victor's empty room would be discovered during the next rounds check. Alarms would sound. David would be called. The police would get involved, but by then they'd be gone. And with Agent Patterson's help, maybe, just maybe, they could finally expose the truth and give Victor the second chance he'd fought so hard to earn. The real battle was just beginning. The safe house apartment in Queens was small and cramped. Nothing like what Victor was used to, but it was secure and anonymous. Rebecca helped him inside, watching nervously through the window as a police car cruised past on the street below. Her phone had been buzzing constantly since they'd left the hospital. Calls from her supervisor, from hospital security, from numbers she didn't recognize. She'd turned it off 20 minutes ago. We have maybe an hour before they trace my car, Rebecca said, pacing the small living room. I should have thought about that. Every parking structure has cameras, every toll booth, Rebecca. Victor's voice was calm despite everything. Sit down. You're spiraling. She sat, her hands shaking. I just kidnapped a patient from a hospital. I'm going to lose my nursing license. I might go to jail. What was I thinking? You were thinking that you were saving my life, Victor said. Which you did. Now we need to call Patterson and let him take it from here. Rebecca pulled out the FBI agent's card with trembling fingers. What if he doesn't believe us? What if he thinks we're both crazy? Then we're in the same position we'd be in if we'd stayed at the hospital. Except at least this way David can't get to me. Victor took her hand. Call him, please, she dialed the number. Patterson answered on the second ring. This is Agent Patterson. It's Rebecca Clark, the nurse who came to see you about Victor Ashford. He's with me. We left the hospital. There was a pause. You did what? His brother was trying to have him declared incompetent. We didn't have a choice. He was in danger. Ms. Clark, do you understand that removing a patient from a hospital without authorization is